She is still alive. But the air already smells as if life here is just a byproduct of craftsmanship. This is not a death sentence. This is technology. On the banks of a narrow river, a medieval town awakens. Along the water are tanneries, pits, smoke, barrels, wooden frames. The air is heavy with the smell of lime, urine, and oak bark, which is used to soak the hides. Today, one of those frames is waiting for a different kind of work. A condemned woman is brought here. She is not accused of murder or treason. The city court's verdict reads, desecration of the flesh. The events took place in Flanders in the mid-14th century. The exact year is lost in the chronicles, but legends date it to around 1350. Later sources say that she treated people with herbs and talked to the dead. The church called it witchcraft, and the city council called it a violation of the craft statutes. They said that her potions spoiled the goods of the tanners. Now the law and the craft have come together in one place. All around her are people, craftsmen in leather aprons, a clerk with scrolls, 2 guards. No one looks at her as a person. In their eyes, she is just material that must go through the entire purification process. You inhale the smell of bark and hot smoke. You hear a steady rhythm, the creaking of wooden frames, a bucket splashing against a stone. The craft continues according to its own rules: temperature, time, order. The city will receive a new model for the book of court sentences. That's what the masters say. The law must have skin. They repeat that this is what justice demands. But you already understand. It is not God or the king who speaks. It is the economy. And this is only the beginning of the story of how the human body became a material of urban production. To understand this scene, you have to look at the city from above, from the bell tower, where only the bells and the wind can be heard. Roofs blackened by smoke stretch along the river. That is where the tanners live. Their workshops are always located near the water, because the work is hard and smelly, and otherwise the city simply cannot stand the smell. But it is water that gives life to this craft. It washes away, cleanses, dissolves everything that must disappear. Tanning is not just the processing of hides. It is the transformation of the body into material, a way to cheat time. The masters said, to make it strong means that it will not decay. And it was this very word that once became an argument for the court, because the law wanted to preserve the body as evidence, and the workshop as a resource. The medieval economy knew no waste. Bones went into glue, fat into soap, hair into brushes. Nothing was lost. Sometimes, according to chronicles, the bodies of the executed were handed over to doctors or anatomists. And in urban legends, sometimes even to tanners. This fact has not been proven, but the very idea was frightening. What if the line between human and material had once been blurred? You see the market. Leather is laid out on the counters. Calf, sheep, goat. It is measured, counted, weighed. Sometimes there are strangely smooth, thin pieces, and then someone quietly turns away. Because in the city, they know money smells the same. When it smells like money, the old masters used to say, a theological justification will quickly be found. And indeed, the city priests blessed the new workshops, saying that everything created by God must serve man. The people put it more simply. Even if it was once a human being, you stand by the water, where the smell of bark, smoke, and ash mixes. Here, on the border between craft and justice, the body has already lost its meaning. Only the texture, color, and strength of the material remain. And the city has learned to turn death into a commodity. In every medieval city, justice was a spectacle. The court was not an office with seals, but a square, a stage where everyone could see that the law existed, and that violating it had a price. Punishment did not simply destroy the guilty. It educated the crowd. You stand among the people. The bells call to the temple, but everyone goes here, to the fairground in front of the town hall. A wooden platform is erected in the middle. Nearby, the city flag, the town crier, the clerk with his scrolls. The clerk reads the sentence in an even voice, as if reporting on grain or taxes, name, article, punishment. He does not say woman. He says the person found guilty. She is brought in wearing a simple shirt, barefoot. Her hair is tied back tightly so that it does not interfere with the administration of justice. Around her are merchants, children, even nuns from the nearest convent. Everyone watches in silence. Because for the city, This is not cruelty. This is order. The law must sound as confident as the bell calling people to mass. Courts often chose punishments for women that were not related to pain, but to humiliation. A man could be hanged or broken on the wheel, but a woman could be stripped naked, paraded in the square, and forced to stand there while people shouted at her. Because her body is not just flesh. It is the property of her family, community, and church. And when she sinned, her guilt had to be washed away with shame, publicly, so that everyone could see how her guilt was being erased. When the verdict is read, the crowd is silent. Not out of pity, but out of habit. They were taught that a woman who heals with herbs is dangerous, that anyone who knows more than a priest can disrupt the order, and that the surest way to restore balance is to make an example of her. You see the clerk putting the final full stop. Nearby, the town mayor glances briefly at the master shoemaker. They understand each other without words. Tomorrow morning, smoke will rise above the river again, and everything will look like business as usual. But the real trial takes place not in the square, but in the workshops, where punishment becomes a craft, and sin becomes material. The tanner's workshops are a world apart, a world that smells of meadow, smoke, and silence. Their yards stand right by the water, where no one goes without good reason. You walk in there and immediately feel the air pressing down on you. Everything here is heavy, the smell, the work, even the silence. A master tanner is neither an executioner nor a judge. His job is to make the material strong. He is used to working with things that are no longer alive. But this time, everything is different. According to legend, the workshop received a special order from the city authorities to create a showcase example of the craft. Not for sale, for history. The assistants work in silence. Everything must be done by the rules. Order, restraint, precision. In this workshop, they don't say person. They say material, work, sample. And when someone says, well done, they mean even, neat, without mistakes. For them, this is not a horror. It is a familiar part of the city's craft. Nearby are shelves with tools, buckets, barrels. Everything is labeled, everything is accounted for. The city keeps track not only of livestock, but also of units of materials sent for processing. In old legends, there is even a phrase, 1 unit of female material. There is no documentary evidence of this, but the expression itself has become part of the city's language. You see the master wiping his forehead. He doesn't care who is being punished. He is only interested in the result, order, cleanliness, standards. When the work is done, he puts the workshop stamp on the new specimen, and it goes into the city books. For him, it's not cruelty. It's just work. The word human no longer exists in this dictionary. There is only material. And fear. Fear that one day your name may appear in the city register, not among the residents, but among the samples. In those days, no punishment was carried out without a blessing, even if it was not justice, but the craft of death. The church stood nearby, not only in the square, but in people's minds. It taught people to believe that the body is sinful material that must be cleansed with fire, water, or lye. The priest who blesses the sentence speaks not of mercy, but of order. His words are simple. The flesh is sinful, therefore it rots. And rot is a sign of separation from God. So when the body is cleansed, people believe that they are washing away not only the skin, but also guilt. Thus, theology becomes an instruction manual for disposal. Treatises on holiness and impurity clearly state, touching human remains is a sin. But if it is for the good of the community, sin becomes service. And this is where the church and craftsmen found common ground. For the tanner who cleanses the material serves not only the city, he serves order. The chronicles mention isolated cases when the remains of the executed became signs of justice. They could be shown as proof that the law had worked. Whether these were real things or symbolic signs, historians are not sure. But the very idea that a punished body can purify others took deep root. When flesh becomes proof of guilt, sin recedes more slowly than fear is removed. Monastic records even contain a legend about the so-called holy examples. They say that the scribe placed his hand on a symbolic object and swore, "May my skin dry up if I lie." No one knows if this really happened. But the ritual conveyed the main thing, the fear of lying before a body that has already been punished. The church taught people to fear their own bodies. and at the same time, it gave permission to punish them when necessary. So every movement of the scraper in the tannery became not just work, but a prayer. Let the flesh be cleansed. And when the priest walks away from the river, raising the censer, the smoke of the bark mixes with the smoke of incense. Prayer and craft merge into one sound, deaf, like a blow to a fiber. But this is only the first stage of purification. For soon, what was called the sinful body will become an object of science. And then people will begin to seek not guilt in the flesh, but knowledge. After sentencing, bodies did not always disappear into the ground. Sometimes they were handed over for the benefit of knowledge. That is how it is recorded in the city books. By the end of the 15th century, the first special halls for training doctors appeared in Europe. And in the 16th and 17th centuries, real anatomical theaters emerged, with galleries, benches, and the cold light of torches. The bodies of criminals became convenient material. The law had already taken away their right to be human. You see this space of knowledge. Wooden benches, the sharp smell of vinegar and smoke. These are not yet large theaters, like those in Padua or Leiden, but rather basement rooms for teaching. Here, the doctor shows students how the body is arranged. Judicial punishment has turned into a lesson. Silence, whispers, the scratching of pens. Knowledge is born alongside fear. Over time, collectors appear in cities, gathering samples of human material. Jars of brine, wax casts, drawings, anatomical tables. Sometimes there are even rumors of books with strangely smooth covers. In museum catalogs, such items are labeled human skin binding. But most historians consider these attributions controversial or legendary. The real archive of the city is not in the library. It is hidden in the bindings, said the clerks who kept the execution records. Because every sentence had material confirmation, a sheet of paper, a seal, a cover. Sometimes these things literally grew together: paper, wax, leather, words. Medicine sought knowledge, but operated according to the same rules as the workshop. The main thing was the result: density, strength, preservation. Doctors said, "To understand a person, you have to open them up." Craftsmen replied, "To clean, you have to remove." The difference is only in words. You see the basement of an old university. Dull folios stand on the shelf. Under each cover is someone's story, someone's sentence. No one remembers what for anymore. But the paper and leather hold fast. And perhaps that is why old books smell so much like a tannery. Because even knowledge, when it is born of punishment, always retains a slight smell of fear. In any city, fear lives longer than truth. As soon as the smoke from the last pit dies down, the stories begin. Whispers in taverns, at the market, by the well. Past events mix in memory, centuries intertwine in one night. No one remembers the exact dates, but everyone knows. Something happened here. They say that at night, you can hear splashing near the tannery, even though all the pits have long been covered. Allegedly, during a storm, a faint spot appears in the water, like the shadow of a woman who was once cleansed. Others swear they saw a craftsman laughing while he worked, and then the prints on his palms disappeared. Such stories are told to children so that they do not go to the river after sunset. Women whisper something else. Since then, they say, no girl in the city is born without a birthmark. Nuns call it a curse, tanners, just a consequence of the water. But every time someone utters the word tanning, the sound seems to chill in the air. Urban legends grow like moss on the damp walls of workshops. They are necessary to keep people in submission, because fear is the most reliable watchdog. If children are afraid of the pits, they will not ask what is happening there. If wives tremble at the very word sin of the flesh, they will not risk healing, teaching, or seeking knowledge. Fear disciplines better than the sword. But over time, something else is born from this whispering, doubt. Someone begins to ask, was she really condemned for witchcraft? Or perhaps because her knowledge threatened the profits of the guilds? Wasn't it easier to call intelligence a sin than to recognize its usefulness? Thus, a new myth emerges about living tanning, about a city where sinners are turned into material for the law. And every time smoke rises above the river, people involuntarily look there with anxiety. Because even now, no one knows for sure where fiction ends and technology begins. In this city, every punishment had its own budget. Execution is not just about morality, it's about accounting. The clerks calculated everything. How much would go to security, how much to wood, how much to the workshop for processing the material. Even the oak bark and meadow were paid for with the citizens' taxes. Everything had its price, even things that, it would seem, had no right to cost anything. You see the expense book, a yellowed sheet, ink, neat handwriting. The body of the condemned woman was transferred to the tannery. Expenses, 3 florins. Income from the sale, 6. The balance was even. The city was satisfied. According to legend, the court could receive a share of the finished material, allegedly used for the covers of court books. There is no documentary evidence of such practices, but the idea itself fits too well into the logic of the time. The church also received its share, donations for the purification of the community. Even the delivery of oak bark was paid for with a surcharge, for the risk involved in performing a godly deed. The economy of fear worked without a hitch. Because fear is a commodity, it was sold through show trials, through legends, through a smell that everyone recognized. And the stronger the fear, the more valuable peace was. People willingly paid for order, for the right not to have their names entered in the city's book of expenses. Officials called it maintaining law and order. But the accounts tell a different story. Punishment fed entire workshops, supported dozens of families, and filled city coffers. The craft thrived on sin, and every piece of leather drying by the river became not only a sign of obedience to the law, but also an accounting document. When horror becomes a business, justice turns into a brand, and the city no longer punishes the sinner. It capitalizes on his guilt. The morning begins again by the river. The air is bitter with steam, heavy with bark and lime. The tanner's workshop lives by a schedule: mix the lye, prepare the frames, dry the material. But today is different. Today they are finishing work on the last order, the one that will be whispered about for a long time to come. The master is silent. His movements are precise, habitual, like a well-rehearsed prayer. The assistant hands him tools, keeping track of the rhythm. The work must be completed on time, before the material loses its properties. The silence is thick, like river water. You stand nearby. Inside, you can hear something clicking: wooden hooks, metal loops, drops falling evenly on stone. Outside the window, the city hums, but the noise does not reach here. Here, a different order reigns. One where everything is reduced to movements, sounds, and repetitions. The master stops. For a moment, it seems that time has frozen with him. Everyone is waiting, not for a command, not for a sign, but for the moment when the line between craft and man is erased, when the process becomes a ritual, and the result is only proof of obedience to the system. The silence lasts a long time, and then the master says, "Enough. It's done." In these 2 words, not triumph, but fatigue. He does not look at the work. He simply takes off his apron and walks to the door. The apprentice is left alone, and he does not know whether to pray or just remain silent. You also stand silently, because even here, in the silence of the workshop, you can hear something invisible squeezing the air. And you want to ask, can anything human survive this treatment? When the smoke over the river dissipates, the city returns to its usual life. The market opens its stalls, children carry water, the priest reads a sermon about humility. And in the tanner's workshop, a new piece hangs on a pole, smooth, even, pale. It will soon be removed, dried, and sold. It looks like ordinary leather. No history, no name. The clerk makes a short entry in the book. Material transferred. Processing completed. Expenses matched. And everything adds up, in terms of numbers, articles, and conscience. Because when the process becomes a habit, even horror can be reduced to a formula. You walk past the river. The water seems a little darker, with a brownish tint. It's just bark, say the tanners. Just a trace of labor. But you already know, this color is a trace of everything that the city calls order. The body has become a document. The skin, proof of power. Every sentence has a material embodiment. Every story, a bill. Every prayer, a seal. Later, this is how it was written in the chronicles. The city is held together not by laws, but by fear that smells of hay and smoke. Sometimes, when the wind changes direction, the smell from the river reaches the square. People wrinkle their noses, cross themselves, turn away. But no one asks what exactly is burning there. Because everyone knows, it's just work. Just another cleansing. This woman's story ended where? Every account begins. In a book. On a cover that shines like new. They say that it was this very leather that held the words of those who condemned her. Never truly private. Never truly safe.